Hi, happy May the 9th. Luckily, we haven't had any major nasty announcements from Putin this morning, but the quagmire in Ukraine does mean that we continue to see major problems with Russian oil and gas exports. In fact, crude exports continue, but in due course will come out of the market. And recent announcements, for example, over the weekend by the G7, will keep considerable heat on oil and gas markets globally. We're now worried about upcoming hurricane season because the refining market in the US is so hot. We're worried that hurricanes may actually cause an oil crisis here in the US. But in the meantime, refining earnings really are leading the way amongst a group that has been reporting outstanding results. And tomorrow we'll see, we think, more outstanding results from Oxy. At the same time, our long oil short tech type call has paid out in spades. For example, we were highlighting on January the 4th on CNBC, I said long Marathon Petroleum, short Rivian. And you can see that Rivian's coming under another whole load of pressure. Further to our line regarding tech, that the definition of a stock down 90% is one that's down 80% that then gets cut in half. My point is keep your foot on the accelerator of this long oil, short tech, short market trade. It's going to keep working until it's pretty obvious that it's stopped, and that's a long way from where we are now. Just further to that market kind of analysis, I put out a note yesterday where we go through our share of the S&P 500 against some of the other stocks in the market. And in this case, we had an absolute classic in the case of Netflix, where you can see here, the blue line is Netflix share of the S&P. The black line is Netflix share of the earnings of the S&P. And you just had this remarkable correction as soon as Netflix went ex-growth and began losing market share in terms of earnings. Sure enough, the stock went back to a market multiple and lost all of its historic premium. So this is an absolute beautiful example of why these charts are so powerful. They can be irrational for years, but ultimately they tend to find you out. If we look at an example of a stock which is undervalued here, for example, Pfizer, you can see the buy side, which is the blue line, the share of the market cap is not buying into the sell side earnings estimates, which may be wrong. But ultimately, Pfizer's multiple here relatively is very low against its history and looks too low. So we come out with a buy on that one. And then if we look at an extreme example of undervaluation, Arch Coal, look at Arch Coal's share of the earnings versus share of the market cap, obviously a buy. Sunrun, by contrast, here you'd be long coal, short solar, which is a call we made later last year. You can see that Sunrun's earnings estimates are collapsing. There's bad outlook here with the solar industry facing anti-dumping limitations on how much solar panels they can import. And with California realizing that their solar policy basically incentivizes the rich, subsidizes the rich at the expense of the poor, this one obviously looks like a sell to us. These are all quantitative, by the way. Apple is interesting. If you see here, its share of the market earnings has only hit 5% in 2012 and hasn't risen. And yet it's had a massive multiple expansion here, which doesn't look that big, but in terms of a stock, the scale of Apple is absolutely enormous, from 100% of the market multiple to 150%. This one is an underweight. If we look at a good example here, Google looks cheap. You can see it's got a very tight relationship between its share of the market and its share of the market earnings. That's a buy, but by contrast, Amazon looks enormously expensive with negative dynamics. And if you sell, if you contrast that with Tesla, which is enormously expensive, but has positive earnings dynamics, that one actually you can find some support. Incidentally, here we look at Ford and say, the problem with Ford is this positive earnings dynamic you see in Tesla simply isn't there in Ford, and hence the very discounted multiple. Ford needs rising earnings estimates to work, and it's just not happening right now. If we just jump forward to an oil, here Exxon, you can see just the very powerful earnings dynamic and the very discounted multiple. Exxon at a relatively historic low multiple means that if this earnings is going up as fast as it is, and remember that Exxon's heavily exposed to refining, the stock is clearly a buy and will clearly work in my view. If we look at an even more extreme example down here, which is the oil stocks, take a look at, for example, EOG, which has got just an insane earnings estimate rise with something of a strong rise, but it's still an absolutely similar to Exxon, extremely low multiple. As long as these earning estimates are going up, which we think they will continue to do, Q2 being stronger than Q1 to start, you'll see that these oils are going to work very well. So that's basically it. Valero here, actually not as powerful as the E&Ps, but remember these lines can move up a lot for refiners and will in the case of Valero. So we sent you that note as an illustration of what we like and don't like across the entire market, with the idea that you continue to keep your foot on the accelerator of oils in a very tough market environment. The buybacks will also be very powerful for oils. Have a great week.